Today, we're looking at how ancient boredom built the modern world. And to really get our heads around this, I want us to do something a little radical. Let's completely step out of our hyper-stimulated present, leave behind the screens, the notifications, the endless feeds, and just travel back with me. We are going back 100,000 years, maybe even 200,000 years, way back to a time long before writing was even a concept, before the very first stroke of art was ever painted on a cave wall, and before a single note of music had ever been played. Imagine a world with absolutely no language as we know it today. Just people sitting there staring out at the landscape with quite literally nothing to do.
Now, to get why this matters so much, we kind of have to look at our lives right now. As you're listening to this explainer, you probably have, 47 different apps installed on your phone? You've got access to streaming platforms with tens of thousands of things to watch, and endless audio for basically every conceivable topic that has ever existed in human history. You literally have infinite entertainment sitting right there in your pocket. And yet somehow you still find yourself feeling bored.
So that brings us to this massive, paradigm-shifting question, one that honestly almost nobody ever thinks to ask. What did ancient humans do when they were bored? And I'm not talking about medieval folks or the Romans or the ancient Egyptians. I mean our absolute earliest ancestors, hundreds of thousands of years ago, just sitting around a fire with nothing to do. The answer to this question actually changes everything we think we know about creativity, how society started, and why your brain works the exact way it does today. This idea completely shatters a huge scientific assumption. For the longest time, researchers just assumed our earliest ancestors were way too busy trying to survive to ever get bored. The whole assumption was that every waking second was this constant, brutal toil of hunting, foraging, building shelter, basically zero downtime. But, that assumption was just wrong. Back in 1966, an anthropologist named Marshall Salins published a paper that completely flipped this narrative on its head. He spent years studying the Kung people of the Kalahari Desert, who live a lifestyle that's incredibly close to our original human ancestors. Salins actually called them the original affluent society. And the crucial point here is this absolutely staggering number he found. These hunter-gatherers only worked an average of 15 to 20 hours a week. And yeah, you heard that right, that's per week, not per day. The rest of the time, they just rested, they hung out, they sat around, they did absolutely nothing in particular. They actually had significantly more free time than most modern humans ever get today. So the question isn't whether ancient humans got bored. They absolutely did. The real question we need to answer is, what happened when they had all that empty time? Well, let's look at the fruits of that empty time. Because when humans have absolutely nothing else to do, we don't just shut down like a broken machine, we play. And that play naturally leads to creation. We're going to dive into exactly what our ancestors managed to build when they had an abundance of empty time and zero entertainment, because honestly, the results are nothing short of extraordinary. Back in 2010, an archaeologist named Francesco De Rico and his team were looking at these shells from a site in South Africa called Blombos Cave. These shells were 75,000 years old. They had these tiny holes carefully drilled right through them and were coated in red ochre. They weren't tools, they weren't weapons, and they obviously weren't food. They were beads. Someone, 75,000 years ago, sat down with literally nothing better to do and made jewelry. It is the oldest known art object in human history. I mean, think about it. Drilling through a shell with a stone tool takes hours, maybe days of just intense patience. But they did it because the alternative was staring at a cave wall. And we see this exact pattern repeat. Jump to the 40,000-year mark. Researchers in southern Germany found a flute made from a vulture bone, perfectly carved with 5 finger holes. Someone just sat down with a free afternoon and a bird bone and literally invented music. Necessity didn't invent art or music. Boredom did. And this brings up such a fascinating insight from neuroscientist Daniel Levitin, who studies the origins of music. He actually argues that our musical ability is older than language itself. Our brains were wired for rhythm and melody way before we could ever string together complex sentences. Why? Because rhythm is basically just pattern recognition, and pattern recognition is exactly what kept our ancestors alive out in the wild. Music is simply what the human brain does when it has absolutely nothing else to process. But boredom didn't just stop at art and music. It invented something far more powerful. Think about it. To be bored, you have to have a concept of time. You have to realize that the current moment is just dragging on and that a different, hopefully better future could exist. Animals don't really experience boredom like this. A dog waiting for its owner is just waiting. But a human sitting in a cave 100,000 years ago, they start to wonder. What if the hunt goes wrong tomorrow? What's just over that mountain? Where do we go when we die? Every single question philosophy, religion, and science has ever asked started the exact same way. Someone was bored, and their mind just started to wander. Boredom literally invented imagination. And modern research perfectly backs this up. In 2013, psychologist Sandy Mann published this incredible study proving that boredom drastically increases our creative output. She had participants do literally the most mind-numbing tasks she could possibly think of, copying numbers out of a phone book. After that, she tested their creativity. And the results? The group that was forced into a state of extreme boredom just completely outperformed everybody else. When your brain is starved of input, it doesn't just switch off. It forcefully generates its own extraordinary stimulation. Okay, so besides making shell beads and daydreaming, there was one more major thing ancient humans did when they were bored. They talked. But what were they talking about? Anthropologist Robin Dunbar actually spent years studying what humans discuss when they aren't talking about anything important. And his findings are honestly kind of hilarious. Roughly 65% of all human conversation is just social gossip. Who did what? Who said what? What's going on with that guy you both know? Ancient humans sitting around the fire weren't just strategizing about hunting logistics. They were gossiping. Now, that might sound like a pretty trivial waste of time, but it absolutely wasn't. Dunbar theorizes that language itself didn't evolve for practical stuff like coordinating a hunt. It evolved for social bonding. See, before complex language, primates bonded by physically grooming each other, picking bugs out of hair, that kind of thing. But physical grooming is incredibly inefficient. It's strictly one-to-one, and it takes a massive amount of time. Language, on the other hand, it's a one-to-many tool. It basically replaced physical grooming by giving us a way more efficient method to build trust. Because suddenly, by using language instead of physical grooming, you could bond with 3, maybe even 10 people all at once around a fire. You could tell stories about someone who wasn't even there, which builds these huge, complex networks of trust. Dunbar found that this allowed human social groups to naturally expand, capping out at around 150 people. Just chatting about absent friends and sharing stories built the absolute foundation of human trust. Human civilization didn't just pop up because we needed to survive. It emerged because we were sitting around with nothing to do, and we just started talking about each other. Boredom invented gossip, and gossip literally invented society. So, let's bring it all back to today. Think about yourself. Lying awake at 2 a.m. The room is dark. Your phone is resting right there on your chest. You're scrolling, you're swiping, just frantically trying to fill the quiet, thinking about nothing in particular. We are absolutely terrified of just being in the dark with our own minds. And this brings us to a really tough modern neuroscience concept that nobody really likes to talk about: cognitive overload. This is the psychological state we're trapped in when we try to eliminate boredom completely. Because we have smartphones now, we make sure that every single waking moment is stimulated. But when your brain is just constantly processing new external inputs, it never actually gets the chance to do what it was built to do in those quiet moments, which is to process, to consolidate, and to create. You actually have a specific system in your brain called the default mode network. This is the exact neural network entirely responsible for your deepest creativity, your self-reflection, and your sense of empathy. And here is the catch. It literally only turns on when you are doing absolutely nothing. Think about that. We spent 300,000 years evolving to fill empty, quiet silence with meaningful thoughts. And then we invented the smartphone, and we've been forcefully shutting off the very network that makes us human ever since. So if there is one thing I want you to take away from our explainer today, let it be this: letting your mind wander is not a modern failure. Sitting in silence without a screen in your hand is not a waste of time. It is the exact same ancient superpower that drove someone to carve the very first bead. It's the exact same mechanism that made someone look up at the stars and ask the very first questions about why we're here. Tapping into the power of the wandering mind activates your empathy, it consolidates your thoughts, and it unlocks an ancient creativity that you are probably suppressing right now. Boredom never held our ancient ancestors back. In fact, it's exactly what made them human. And it can do the exact same thing for you. So I'm going to leave you with one final thought to chew on. What will your brain actually create if you finally just put the phone down and allow yourself to be bored?